Good morning, Karen.
Oh, good morning, Bernie.
Hope all is well with you and
Yeah, no, everything's great. My camera on my computer is on the fritz, so no video, just for me, just audio.
are you using a laptop or a desktop?
A laptop.
Have you done the Microsoft updates?
You know, that's a good question. I let our, because it's a city issued laptop, so I did let our IT department know about
Yes.
the camera issue. And they had it for about a day. But I think they
Oh,
got a
okay.
service call in, yeah. So that I'll mention that because all of a sudden, I think, I don't know, at one of our last meetings, I couldn't get the camera to work.
Yeah, I've had that happen for various reasons for various customers of mine, and so my recommendation is to take a look at those updates. They happen so frequently that Microsoft changes little things about their operation, and it will affect the sound or the camera at times, and it can be a pain.
That's good to
Hopefully it's just
know.
that.
Yeah,
Hopefully it's
yeah,
just
because
that.
it's a pretty new machine.
Yeah.
I see that Marie has joined us,
Okay, great.
and let's see, Patrick had been on, but I think he must have dropped off.
I didn't see him at all. I was waiting to get on, and I guess you would have let me in, but maybe you
Right.
saw him ahead of time.
Good morning.
I saw him. Good morning, Marie.
Good morning, Marie.
How are you guys today?
Oh,
Great.
Okay, let's see. He must have maybe lost a connection. I'm admitting him now.
Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, Bernie, how are you?
Good. We haven't had you. We've missed you.
Sorry about that.
Well, I heard you on vacation. Hopefully you had a great time.
Thank you. Thank you. I had to watch my father for about a week. So.
Oh, okay. I understand. Hopefully he's
doing better. He's doing better.
great.
Thank
That's
you.
good to hear. That's good to hear.
I
Yeah,
apologize for not.
I
being
know
in
how
contact.
it feels to deal with older parents. And I understand because you're a good son.
I don't know if my father would necessarily agree with that, but thank you. You guys have been doing a lot of work.
I think we have. It it sometimes feels daunting to me, but yeah.
It's just never ending. There's just so much, just from seeing all the work you've been putting out, the work product that I've been keeping up to date with. It's just nonstop. It just every time you start to make progress, there's more and more stuff to add to continue to look at.
Oh yeah, that's true. Very true.
Good morning.
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 Janice, is that you?
Yes, it is.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's interesting. I don't see Janice on here. That's interesting.
Just iPhone.
Yeah, I don't know how to change it. Sometimes I can rename it, but now it's not giving me that option.
I don't know, Janice, let me ask my IT folks about that.
Okay.
Because I've wondered that as well, and I couldn't figure it out either.
Because I know sometimes when I'm on a Zoom call, it'll give me an option to rename it, but for this particular group, it does not. So
there might be something that I need to do on my end. So
okay,
I'll ask.
Well, I'm here.
I think everybody has joined us now.
Yes. Well, we don't have
actually, Merlene is not here yet.
Yes. So hopefully, good morning, Richard. I have your picture, but not your sound.
Okay, here I am.
Oh,
Good morning. Great.
Hi.
Good morning, everybody. Hope I sent out a quick agenda this morning so that we have some focus as to we're going. Hopefully, everybody. I'll read through it. It's pretty short. So the agenda covers review of the table of contents that we've been asking for additional policies for, and see if there are any additional requests for additional policies to go on our list. The next item is the review of the current set of policies that we're looking at, which were the strip search and body cavity search policy, persons in crises policy, domestic incidents, lethal assembly policy. Oh, I could be saying that wrong. And threat assessment of policy, and then cell block procedures and prisoner handling policies. Those are the ones that we have on our list that are new to the group that we've had before. And then just our covering of what the next meeting with PD is, to see if we have what policies, topics, and issues to discuss, and the creation of a list of questions so that we have a little bit more uniformity over our meeting for our next session. And then any open discussions we have. Does anybody else have anything else to add to that?
I didn't get your, whatever
Okay.
that email was.
Yeah, it's just I sent it this morning. It's possible that due to one email, it bounced back off. None of it got out to anyone, but I'll send it out again. But I'll use it just to generally cover the topics that we'll cover this morning. And so, first off is the table of contents, and we have Merlene on the line now, and I think so. We have our full subcommittee here.
That's correct.
Just wanted to ask, is there, outside of the new policies that we've gotten, Marilyn needs to unmute her mic shortly. Are there any other policies that we want to have that we don't have at the present time? And if we're not able to remember them right now, there are a few policies that I've seen going through the table of contents that I'll put up to ask if we can get. But in terms of what we have, is there any other policies that anyone has that they'd like to have?
Well, are we sure that we have a full set?
What does that
I mean,
mean?
if we don't know what we're missing, well, if we don't know what we're missing, like what other policies would there be?
Well, we have the table of contents, and from the table of contents, we could look at what all the other policies that exist in that book that we saw when we were in the department are.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm on, I think I sent an email to the committee asking if we have person in crisis.
We have that. Yeah,
We have that threat assessment.
we have that.
Okay, domestic incident lethality assessment.
We have that.
Okay, cell block procedures.
We have that.
Okay, those are some of the ones that I thought might be important.
And the strip search body camera.
Yeah, I read
cavity.
that one. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
some comments about that one.
So did you receive the other policies? I know that we received. I thought Karen sent them out already.
I don't know if I have.
I'm looking through my emails now because
Yeah.
I don't see them, but I'm looking through my emails because I could have missed it.
Karen, I know that you're on with us still, possibly. You sent these out, or did you just send them to me and I needed to send them out?
I sent out, I shared with the committee the strip search policy.
I got that one.
And the
Got
other
that.
one, I think I was waiting on a response from you, but I am happy to send those now.
Yeah, the other
Okay.
policies was the persons in crises, domestic incident, threat assessment, and cell block procedures. Those were requested by Richard.
Yeah, I just
But-
thought we ought to just look at them, you know.
Bernie, I didn't get what you sent this morning.
Either did I.
So yeah, it was blocked by everyone. I'll see if I can send it again right now, see if you get it. I think that what I had a problem with was one of Merlin's email addresses, which blocked me from sending it to everybody.
So,
Hmm.
okay.
I'll try to send it again. It'll take me a minute or so because I have to construct the email.
Okay, that's all right.
All right, do you want
But
to
we
talk
could
about
start
the,
talking.
Yeah.
We could start talking about, are there any other requests for policies based off of the table of contents that we've seen?
I'm looking for something right now on my table of contents. I thought I printed it out, but I don't see it in front of me. Just.
When, do you know what day that was sent? The table of contents?
oh,
Oh, it was good. It was 2 weeks ago, I think we had that, before
Oh,
we even went
okay.
out.
yeah, I
Oh,
can tell you, I'm sure, I looked
Then
at
I
that
have
email again just now.
Oh, is that the one that's, says,
It's dated Friday, November 13, 2:52 p.m., I think.
I just
Well,
forwarded
that's not 2
to
weeks ago.
everybody the
not.
policies on. I just forwarded to everyone the policies on persons in crisis, domestic incident,
Okay.
lethality assessment, threat assessment, and cell block procedures.
Great, great.
And
here
I
it
just
is, yeah.
resent the agenda, so hopefully it didn't bounce back so far, so let me know if you received that.
Yeah, I found the email from Bernie. It's actually November 12 at 11:45 p.m. and it has the 4 attachments with the table of contents. So I can resend that to everybody now if you want.
Sure.
I just
Or-
got it, but it's one page. I only see one page.
Well, there's 4 attachments.
Okay.
Policy numeric, policy alphabetic, procedures numeric, and so forth. So I'll just resend that to everybody right now.
All right, thanks.
Let's see who's on this list. I have a question. What about Pat McCarchick? Is he on this
He's
committee?
on. He's actually on with us today.
Hi,
Really?
Richard.
Pax,
There you
Yeah,
are.
Richard.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, here we go. So now I'm going to send this to everybody. Okay.
So while you're doing that, I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention, there's an article in today's New York Times about the CCRB in New York City that's
Yeah.
making all these recommendations that the police are largely ignoring.
I saw that. I got that from someone else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was interesting. I read the whole thing and it was, I recommend that everybody else does too.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that presents a whole problem about like, well, what does the CCRB, if we recommend that one exists, what, powers it should have? Because it looks like, that it sounded, I didn't read the article thoroughly, but it sounded like what they were saying was that there were recommendations from the CCRB, but then the police department didn't follow those recommendations. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Or they did in such a small percentage of cases. Or, the CCRB would recommend, say, a, year-long suspension and the police would turn around and suspend somebody for 10 days.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, do you know, Richard, how big the CCRB is in New York?
I don't know the details. I mean, I know that they have sort of people that you could call commissioners who sort of make the decisions. They have a staff that
Mhm.
investigates things. They hold hearings. They make recommendations. That's,
Okay.
sort of
So-
what
so
I
it
know
sounds-
about it.
It sounds like there's a lot there that we have to discover about that
Yeah.
as we look forward to, I think as a general committee, make a recommendation for such an organization to exist in White Plains. What I'd like to move on to, I just want to ask, what is the time frame of everybody for today's conversations? Do you have to be finished in an hour? Do we need to be finished at 11 o'clock, 11:30? What is our commitment to today's conversations? Because I just want to be clear, we oftentimes have to run off or whatever. And so,
I was assuming that we'd be done by 12 at the latest.
okay. Everyone else?
Yeah,
I
Well,
plan
you
at
know,
12.
12 would be
you know,
good for me.
yeah, I'd like to, leave, hopefully before 12,
Okay.
maybe 11:45, but I think that's going to be enough time for what we have to do today.
Okay. Marilyn,
Same.
same
So
thing with you? Okay. And Richard, the same thing with you?
Yeah,
Okay, good. So everybody's received the table of contents. It appears as though we haven't had an opportunity to go through that. So we'll move off from that and I think focus on, we could have conversations about the strip search policy. And I think that's the only one that we've had. Hopefully, has everyone had an opportunity to look at it or review it in any way? I have.
Yes.
I looked
Yes.
at it. Oh, yeah.
Okay, and I'd just like to preface by, I know that the strip search policy was brought up when we were in our meeting with the police department, but Richard, you brought it up. Can I ask you, what was your interest in this initially?
okay. Well, historically, there have been, lawsuits and complaints about strip search policies being, really intrusive and traumatizing to people. And, there was a lawsuit in New York City about strip searches of people visiting people at Rikers Island, for example, or at other New York City Department of Corrections facilities, or that type of thing. And so there's been a lot of complaints about that kind of thing happening because these strip searches can be like very intrusive, and they have to be justified under the law. So I was just looking at a case from August of 2020 from the Appellate Division 3rd Department that says it is clear that a strip search must be founded on a reasonable suspicion, talking about people who've been arrested now, that an arrestee is concealing evidence underneath clothing, and the search must be conducted in a reasonable manner. And that's citing a case from the New York State Court of Appeals and so forth. So again, it means that there has to be reasonable suspicion, even if the person's been arrested. So we're assuming that there's probable cause for arrest. To go the extra step of doing a strip search, there has to be reasonable suspicion to believe that they're concealing evidence underneath clothing, and the search has to be done in a reasonable manner. Now, if we take a look at the actual search policy, strip search policy, it says reasonable suspicion to believe the prisoner is concealing contraband or weapons. Okay. And then they start talking about reasonable suspicion may be based on the nature of the offense. Has nothing to do with the, reasonable cause to believe that the person is concealing contraband or weapons. The appearances, arrestee, and appearance and demeanor. So does that mean if the person looks mean, or the person is, making insulting remarks about police officers, now we can strip search him? The circumstances surrounding the arrest, I mean, unless those circumstances, cause us to believe that the prisoner is concealing contraband, I don't see, how that's right. His criminal record, particularly past violent crimes and narcotics offenses, I don't see it. Then, it says the discovery of evidence weapons, in a at a stage prior to the arrest. These things that they have that they're saying can be reasonable suspicion are very troubling to me because, they either have reasonable suspicion to believe that the prisoner is concealing contraband, which is what the law permits, or they don't. So I just found this to be very troubling in terms of, going beyond that which is legal, in contrast to some of the other policies, that where they're following these, like the Graham versus O'Connor case, where they're saying, well, police officers can base their, from the totality of the circumstances, looking back to see if the police officer is justified, but in using an act of violence against somebody, which is a very pro-police standard. Here, it's beyond, I think, what the law permits, because they're suggesting something beyond what is, it's simply reasonable suspicion to believe that the arrestee is concealing evidence under his clothing, or weapons would be okay. But, that's it. I just don't see how this is, I think that this procedure is suggesting to police officers a broader set of circumstances for permitting strip searches than what the law allows.
Does anyone else have any questions or issues behind this?
I do. I'm listening to what Richard is saying, and it makes perfectly sense to me. I'm just wondering how we can word this in our recommendation, that would make sense. I don't, Richard, can you help me understand how we could word this? Because I'm hearing what you're saying, and I agree with you.
I would like to.
All we would have to do is limit it to, the part about, what it says about the first sentence.
What are you reading under number 2, the policy?
It's 4 procedures. Strip
Okay.
searches 1.
Okay.
So
Okay.
4A1.
Okay.
No person arrested, especially persons for traffic violations and misdemeanors,
Okay.
unless the arresting officer has reasonable suspicion to believe the person is concealing contraband or weapons.
Okay.
I mean, that sentence is okay.
But I don't want the word reasonable. I don't want that word reasonable bothers me.
Well, but that's what the law is. That's what the law permits. If a police officer has reasonable suspicion to believe, like, let's suppose that the police officer saw the person, put something in his mouth when he was being arrested for a drug sale. Well, then the police officer may have reasonable cause to believe that the person put, drugs in his mouth or something like that, or or saw a woman put drugs in her bra, or like put something in her bra area.
I get that.
Okay, now we have reasonable suspicion if the person is otherwise being arrested to say, okay, well, we're not going to let you hide evidence or contraband.
Got you.
But that would be reasonable suspicion.
But that would be reasonable suspicion to an honest officer. So what if we're dealing with an officer that isn't so honest and reputable? Couldn't he just say he had reasonable suspicion, or is there just no way around that?
I think that question, Janice, I think that question that you just posed then causes us to be suspicious of any officer. It doesn't matter whether.
Any officer isn't going to.
Yeah, but the question, the way that you pose that, I think that it makes me suspicious of any officer. I can't determine what an officer, whether he is honest or dishonest. How do I make that determination if I'm being arrested? How can I make a determination if an officer is honest or dishonest?
You can't, but I mean,
So,
there are,
and
I
so,
mean, I guess you
Well,
can't.
we do it all the time at suppression hearings.
and
So
I
let's
understand
suppose
that you
that,
do.
you know,
What I'm bringing up is that Janice was saying that we're making a determination here that may affect something in this policy that may determine whether an officer is honest or dishonest. I think that test, we can't even begin to test that or have a policy that has any basis on determining whether an officer is honest or dishonest. I think that's
So we,
problematic in my eyes for looking
so
at
you're,
this policy in particular.
so you're saying we just have to assume that they're an honest cop?
No, I have to take into account that they're professionals at doing their job, and they will follow the policies and procedures that exist. And when they don't, that we're able to in various ways bring that up, or that their superiors will be able to identify what procedures they did not follow appropriately, and therefore that will be accounted for in that way. But in order for me to try to get into a mind of an officer to say he's honest or dishonest, that's something that I can't even bring uh, that's like me saying that I'm walking in the street and that an officer look at me and say that I'm honest or dishonest by just my mere presence of being there. If I test the same way in the same direction, that's why I have an issue with some of the policies that we're looking at. Uh, it causes me to say, if I'm that officer, how am I performing my job? And does this clearly state for me how I perform the job correctly or incorrectly? And
Well,
versus whether what I have in my mind to be true. It's like my saying that all officers could be racist. And I can't make that determination, especially from a policy.
well, that's very true, and I agree with you, but I don't think we would be having this conversation if all officers were honest and good. I don't think we would need to be having police reform if we assumed all officers were good and honest. So I don't know, maybe, I guess you're right. I don't know how we can do that. So, you're right about that, but it just makes me a little uneasy because even though I know most officers are good, especially in White Plains, I'm leaning towards that most of them are good. And but I can't help but wonder, if there's somebody out there that's not good. But I don't know how I would be able to do that, to reword this, but
Well, if I could jump in, I think the only way that you're going to try to affect this or to make it better is by having clear and severe, somewhat severe consequences. If it's like making an arrest, a cop makes an arrest based upon probable cause. Whether or not that's true can only be determined like at a later hearing. And if it shows that he messed up, then there would be consequences. But to prevent all those things, I mean, that's why, you can't possibly prevent every violation of rules. It's just impossible. But the only thing we could do is maybe provide clear consequences for violations of those rules.
true. That's true.
I don't think that and I agree with you, Marie, but I don't think that this policy speaks to the consequences. It's more so speaking to the procedure in policy as to what the officer is supposed to or not supposed to do in the use of strip search and body cavity searches. And so, as we talk to this particular policy, how do we reflect on that? I think that some of what uh, Richard, you referred to, may take me back to one of the previous policies that we looked at, in which we're looking at frisks and searches, and then to how does an officer make the determination that he or she should do a frisk or search, which then leads to the greater process of doing a body strip or a cavity search. Um, And maybe that's some of the place that we also need to be more clear as to what is the process, as to what an officer, how they've used their judgment to go ahead and do a strip search or body cavity search. Well, how do we get there? How do we get to this point? So it's just not just that I walk up to someone on the street and say I'm going to do a strip search or a body cavity search. I in some of the instances that I've seen and been witness to, whereas this might have been performed in order to alleviate the officer feeling as though that they may be threatened at some juncture in the process of having arrest and securing a suspect or someone who's under arrest in the process of transporting them or things of that nature also. And I don't think that this is just something that is determined as a general arrest on the street. But I'm not clear about that with this. So I'm questioned as to at what point an officer would use this policy to cover an action that they might have that they're looking to perform or have performed.
Oh, it should be post-arrest. I mean, obviously you can't do it for anybody who's not under arrest.
And
And-
in
and
my
so-
experience, it occurs usually in search warrants or in cases involving suspected drug dealers after an arrest has been made, where they believe that they have stashed, after doing surveillance, whether rightly or wrongly, narcotics, either in or underneath clothing. And if you get into body cavity searches, inside actual body areas. So in my experience in Mount Vernon, the majority of strip searches and body cavity searches involve cases involving narcotics.
And you had further said where someone was already under arrest? Is
Oh,
that the
it
case?
should be under arrest, correct. This shouldn't be
Okay.
being done.
So
when an arrest
I
has
would
not
also
been
ask everyone, is that something, from what I'm hearing, you say that they're under arrest. I don't know if what I've read here helps me understand that this is being used in situations where someone is already under arrest.
Well, I think that's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, I think
you know,
that's under what Richard was reading under subdivision 4, category A, subdivision 1. No arrested person will be strip searched unless.
Yeah.
So they're already taking the premise that he's already arrested or she's already arrested
Okay.
for a certain crime. And now they want to get to that heightened level where they're able to perform this. And I think it's our job to devise a policy so that the officers, once they're hired or already on the force and they review this policy, if they don't follow the policy that we suggest or that is eventually adopted, that there'll be clear guidelines for a group who's going to decide on punishment, or a citizen review board or whatever it happens to be, that can clearly show that this was our policy. The officer clearly did not follow that policy, and now there should be ramifications. So I think we should try to be focusing on making the policy as clear as possible so that when it's shown that they violated that, then there can be consequences.
Very good. And so back to what you're saying, Richard. Can you restate in clarification to what you were saying before, where we talk about item 4 procedures? A, strip searches. No requested person will be strip searched. Can you make your point about that again for me?
Well, yeah, all I'm saying is that the second sentence with the bullet points should be deleted here, because, if they either have reasonable suspicion to believe the prisoner is concealing contraband or weapons, or you could say evidence. But what I didn't like is this list of things that are not related to reasonable suspicion to believe the prisoner is concealing contraband or or weapons. I mean, the fact that may have been, they seized a firearm from, the person's possession before they got arrested. Well, maybe he's got, ammunition, in his nether region. But unless they have probable cause or reasonable suspicion to believe that that actually is the case, that doesn't give them the right to, embarrass and humiliate somebody because they've been arrested for a firearms offense. So it just, some of these things, just seem like, his criminal record. I mean, they don't seem helpful, and they seem like they're giving police officers, or distracting them from what the standard is. That's my only point there.
Anyone else have thoughts to that?
So Richard, are you recommending that we take the list that they had with the bullets out completely?
Yeah. In other
Okay.
words, I think that from the point where it should just end with the first sentence.
Right. Okay.
And that other stuff is not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, if there's a positive reading on a magnetometer and the
Mhm.
person doesn't have an artificial hip, or something like that, that could be reasonable suspicion that the person is, got metal somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mhm.
okay, that makes some sense, but
Mm-hmm.
some of these other things, it's his appearance.
Yeah.
What does that mean? He's scowling.
Mm-hmm.
He's laughing inappropriately.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bullet that's on the second page that says detection or suspicion of objects beneath the suspect's clothing. So do you feel that that doesn't
I just
fit?
don't think it's helpful to have these when the standard is very straightforward, right? I emailed it to everybody. A strip search must be founded on a reasonable suspicion that the arrestee is concealing evidence underneath clothing, and the search must be conducted in a reasonable manner. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's not confusing. There's no
Right.
reason to confuse it with, some of these things. It doesn't limit them from using a magnetometer or
Right.
taking into account that, we already found, that the person had, an ammunition cartridge in his shoe or something like that. We can take those things into account. It's just that these, putting these, maybe based on but are not limited to,
Mm-hmm.
are not helpful. I mean, if they, what is reasonable suspicion to believe that, could be based on a lot of different things, but it can't be based on like, well, this person is, a black person.
Mm-hmm.
It looks dangerous to me.
Mm-hmm.
Look at his demeanor. He looks
Mhm.
very black. Come on.
Yeah.
What is
Yeah.
that?
And I agree with you, and I think that was the basis of what the stop and frisk program was in New York City. I think that definitely was out of line. But I think that in all that we've been reading through all of the policies that we see that there's some sense of policing or police professionalism that gives the officer the ability to discern or use their judgment as to the criminality or potential criminality of a person that they are encountering. And I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just saying that I see that across all of the policies that we're dealing with. This uh, um, ability that's been given to an officer to make a judgment based on their own mind as to what's taking place with the person that they're dealing with or persons that they're dealing with. Would you say that that's the case in the sense of other policies that we've read?
Yeah, all you can do is set these policies, like Pat was saying. I mean, we set the policies. We try to make it clear to police officers, who work for the city of White Plains and hopefully other police departments that, this is what you're allowed to do. And, don't do something that you're not allowed to do. I mean, you can't stop individuals all the time from violating the law or the policy of the police department, but at least you can make a clear policy.
I think this might be making it more confusing for the officer who would be reading this and basically saying, oh, the nature of my offense is narcotics, and that gives me now reasonable cause to search him because I found narcotics before I got him. And it almost gives a false sense of what reasonable suspicion might be, because you look at these bullet points and they might think I have one of these, or he's high on PCP, so that's his demeanor and appearance. There we go. That automatically means, and that's not what reasonable suspicion is saying in looking for a body search. So I do agree with Richard that if we can just simplify it, instead of putting these bullet points, which might confuse an officer into thinking he has reasonable suspicion because of what they're listing.
I see that. Does anyone else have any other thoughts behind that?
I agree, and I'm looking at this one, well, I guess it's going back up top where it says field strip searches. And maybe like Pat knows the answer to this, but when would a field strip search ever be appropriate? Now, I mean, it says that will be conducted in the rarest of circumstances, but I can't imagine that someone who's been arrested and is handcuffed would ever be a threat to the extent that he would need to be stripped.
I think it would be something like in the Boston bombing.
Can you point to what part of the
That's number
document
2,
you're
right
referring to?
under, that's under 4A, subdivision 2 now. It's literally right underneath.
Okay, I see.
Part we've just been talking
So on
about. with
page
field
2,
strips is-
yes.
I'm assuming that's like in a Boston bombing case where someone might have a device that could detonate, and that would have to be done right at the scene, as opposed to taking the
Okay.
person back to headquarters and putting them in a secured room that no one else is allowed to view. It would be my belief of what that is applying to.
Okay, that, I never even
Yeah,
thought of that.
I don't really
Just
have a
looking-
problem with that. I mean, I can't imagine that, they're saying exigent circumstances. I mean, it has to be pretty damn extreme.
Exactly.
And it says with the explicit approval of a supervisor. So, cop on the street, has to say like, I think we have to, there's a bomb that went off. We want to make sure this guy doesn't have a detonator on him or something like
Let's call the
that.
sergeant or lieutenant on duty.
Let's call the boss. Boss, we want to just, pull up the guy's shirt and look at, carefully and things like this right on the street. And, he gets the go ahead. I mean, they could criticize it later, but, if there's an exigent circumstance, like at the moment, there's like danger to the community,
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. That's not going to apply to a narcotic search. That's not going to apply to anything like that.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
If the danger is gone, once you put the guy under arrest, then, okay, we're done.
And there's
now.
no basis to that. And then if they violate that, that's clear enough and easy enough to show. There'll be repercussions down the line for whoever did that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So we're not making any recommendations for change to that particular line, number 2.
I don't believe so.
Okay. There's one issue that I have, and it may just be a typing or technical issue, and that is it says, and it refers to it in several places in the document itself, CPR 120. There is no CR 120 when I took a look at the table of contents. Now, it could exist, but in all the table of contents that I looked at, I didn't see that. I think it's actually PR 124 or 123. So I think it's just maybe a typo.
Well, where is PR 24?
On page, I'm not looking at the table of contents right now. I have to pull it up. Just a second.
No, I know that you're talking about number 5 that references PR 120, but, and you say you think it could be 124, but where is 124?
Yeah, I have to look it up on the table of contents.
Okay.
If you give me a few, I'll find it.
$124 is confidential informants.
Okay, well, you know what, if you go back to the first page under policy, the last line says CPR 120, interactions with transgender individuals.
Yes.
You see that? So that might be something that was added later
Yes,
on.
and it's not in the table of contents, just
Well, that's something we could try to find,
yes.
you know, note of and write down, try to locate what PR 120 means.
Yes. I don't see it there at all. You're right. So, Janet,
Yes.
is there anything else that you see within this particular policy that we should?
I don't see anything else.
All right, so we're just recommending that those bullet points be removed, and that we need to find out what, if one PR 124 is an additional policy, it's not in the table of contents.
Right. It's just that, we want to stop. We should eliminate everything after the first sentence of 4A1. I downloaded a case from the Court of Appeals about strip search policies and all that type of thing, which I can send around if you want to see it.
Yes, I think it would help if you send it on. It's just
All righty.
more of our education would definitely.
Okay. It's 7 pages. It's not very long.
Merlin, do you have any additional issues behind the strip search policy that we're reviewing?
No, I don't.
And Patrick, anything else that you'd like to add?
No, nothing further than what
You
I've
know
already
what? I actually have a question for Pat. What exactly is a strip search? I mean, obviously there's a body cavity search and there's a strip search. So a strip search, I'm thinking it's somebody, you just take off all your clothes, but you can't actually, search body cavities. Am I right?
Exactly. That's correct. You can't
Okay.
protrude or intrude into a person's body. So if not to be vulgar, if someone takes drugs and puts it up their butt,
Right.
which we've had, or if they swallow drugs, that would then require a body cavity search, which is going to require a search warrant for you to be able to go into the person's body
Right.
to recover what you believe are narcotics or a weapon or things of that nature. Whereas a strip search is usually you have stuff that you've placed in your underwear or places like that that you couldn't normally get to without violating someone's rights unless you have reasonable suspicion that someone's there. You can't just take someone back to headquarters and then just immediately strip search them just because.
Okay. So it's the removal of all clothing, I guess.
It means it doesn't have to be the removal of all clothing. A lot of strip searches don't require you to get completely naked.
Okay.
And it's going to depend on what the reasonable suspicion that you believe the contraband is going to be. If
So-
you've seen someone try to, what you believe, conceal something in a bra, it doesn't give you reasonable suspicion necessarily to have them remove their panties.
So Patrick, being that you're going through that detail, is it possible if you give us a description of the different types of searches that may take place? Because the strip search is particular to having some clothing removed, but there are other types of searches that take place. And how are they generally different than the strip search?
Well, searches will happen on almost every arrest, a basis of some search, be it of a vehicle, be it of the initial person based on a visual. And it goes by the DeBoer standard. There's going to be 4 levels of criteria that you're going to have to meet before you can conduct any type of search as to what is your degree of certainty as to your reasonable suspicion, as to your probable cause. Is it enough just to stop and inquire? Is it enough to detain? Is it enough now to do a pat down? Can you then make the arrest, which gets you potentially to a strip search, which could then get you to a search warrant to do a body cavity? So there's so many different intricate things, and I'm sure Richard has done more suppression hearings than I, and that's usually where all of this comes out, is the justification of the stop, and then the justification as to the officer's belief, either as to reasonable suspicion or probable cause, that the detained person has committed a crime. And so it just kind of builds upon itself if it's done correctly, that you just can't, like in the city where they were having stop and frisk for really no real valid reasons. The law, if it's followed correctly, has some built-in guidelines that not every person and not even every person who is stopped or even arrested should be searched. And there has to be a foundation that the officer is able to delineate and then testify to, justifying his actions.
Yeah, I think we talked about this when we looked at the field search
Field stops.
policy, field
Yeah.
stops. Okay, so that, what Pat is talking about is that before you can, do a search of an individual, you have to have, first there has to be something like reasonable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous if you're going to start patting them down, and there's a lot of details to what that is. And then, but if you arrest somebody, then you can do what's called a search incident to arrest, meaning that you can search them and what the Supreme Court refers to as the grabbable area. This is to, so that the police officer can search the immediate area where the person is being arrested. And then if you stop a vehicle for speeding, you're not necessarily permitted to then search the vehicle. The search has to be justified in its inception, and there has to be probable cause, or something like that to search a vehicle. It's a whole complicated area of law that, there are these levels that this case called DeBoer that Pat is talking about, that the State Court of Appeals has, which is the highest court in our state, has set down and has generally followed, so that, in general, warrantless searches are permitted under a limited number of circumstances, and it has to do with whether there's probable cause to believe that the person has committed a crime. And then, there's a preference for warrants, so that if we believe somebody's committed a crime, and, there's no exigent circumstances, in general, we have to go get a warrant to conduct a search, but we don't necessarily need a warrant to arrest somebody if we have probable cause to believe they've committed a crime. And then you could search the person incident to arrest. If the person is driving a car, you might not have authority to search the person's whole car, but if you're impounding the car, you could do something called an inventory search. We could just go on and on with this, but that's in general how it works.
Should we have, with that in mind, should there be a policy specifically on searches that doesn't get kind of muddled by, for example, stop and frisk, which had a lot of other information in or other explanations in it for an officer's actions, should we have a separate policy for uh, the other types of searches, other types of physical searches versus um, just having one for field stops and then one for body cavity searches and strip searches? Would it be more clear for the officers to have that? I think it'd be more clear for the public to understand that, but would it be more clear for the officers to have that also?
Sounds challenging.
I'm just asking the question. I mean, you guys work in the industry and you know more because you've seen it more. It's just as a civilian, it just makes sense to me to think that if there was a separate policy for those searches other than body searches that gets explained or has an explanation to it, versus it just being something that's part of the field stops process.
Just don't know how we would draft the language that might not confuse the issue. I understand the point that, especially if you're a civilian who gets stopped, it would be important to know how the cop is supposed to react and what his policy is so that you know that he's going beyond that right then and there.
Yes,
I
I
just don't
think
know
that's
how to
what I'm kind of
delineate
pointing
that
to.
outside of what Richard was just stating about on certain cases, if you get arrested, there can be a search of your grabbable area. If your car is getting impounded, there's going to be an inventory search of the vehicle, which they say is to help the person whose car is getting towed so that they know specifically what was in there in case it goes to a tow yard and things then get missing. That there's a itemization of what was in that vehicle. And it's basically done almost under the auspices is that it's an inventory for the defendant so that he knows if anything goes missing, what was there. Not saying that that's why it's necessarily done, but that's how it kind of gets spun.
I understand, and the more that you talk about it, the more complex. Because I could just envision, and please, anybody jump in if you feel I'm spending too much time on this issue, Janice or whatever. It's just if I'm a civilian and I'm stopped by an officer, and that officer deems that they should, for some reason, do a pat down or a frisk, which maybe there's a difference between a pat down and a frisk. I'm not absolutely sure,
No, that's
and
the
I
same
need some
thing.
guidance on that. But are they one and the same thing,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
when
they
would
are.
one be used versus the other, or
They're the
yeah.
same.
They're
It's
treated
the
the
same.
same basically in the law.
Yeah, I mean, a frisk or a pat down just means you can touch the outside of somebody's clothing all over their body, and that's can only be justified. Well, it could be justified if you're arresting somebody, but assuming you're not even arresting the person, if you have, the law says, if you have a reasonable suspicion that the person has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a felony, then, or crime even, and you have reasonable suspicion to believe that the person is armed and dangerous, now you have authority to pat that person down for weapons. For weapons, not for
So
narcotics, not for
so
child pornography, weapons.
so if stopped on the street by an officer and they decide to do a pat down, which may be different than doing a search, which may be to look inside my pockets, is that
Right, the
different?
pat down is to feel like a hard object.
Right.
They can't necessarily feel drugs and go in and grab it. If they feel the hard object, now does it heighten, does it raise what they have to a reasonable suspicion that you're now carrying a weapon based on the feel of the hard bulge? That's usually what you see in a police report, is that term, a hard bulge or a bulging, and they're referring to a weapon.
So,
firearm.
so that is in marked way different than them to an officer stopping me, doing a pat down, and then determining that they want to uh, 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 um, reach into my pocket, my back pocket, my front pocket, or something of that nature, or any. I may have a bag on me. That's different than doing a pat down. Correct.
Correct.
So, and that's why I'm asking: should we have a something that identifies that one versus the other in terms of a policy? I know as a civilian, it would help me understand. I don't know if it helps the officer in doing his job more.
Well, we had some problems with the field stops manual, which we brought up, right? So, for example, that manual said a forcible stop is justified when an officer reasonably suspects criminal behavior exists, which can be based on past articulated experiences. I don't know what the hell that means, but that's not the law. Okay, so this is why it's important to, for us to make recommendations about some of these field stop things that are confusing in a way that could provide bad, not only legal advice, but bad advice generally to police officers. Because the problem is not limited to, oh, the police officer found contraband that he shouldn't have found. That's what lawyers like me or Marie are litigating. But the problem is, if you are traumatized by a police officer abusing his authority and they don't even find anything wrong, you're still traumatized. So that's why we want to make sure that there's no abusive behavior, but that we discourage abusive behavior. I'm not saying that it's routine in the city of White Plains, but is it, the policy should be, you're not, being abusive and, frisking people, putting your hands in people's pockets, and then, okay, so you didn't find anything, and, you tell the person, you pardon my French, okay, fuck off. Now the person has been abused by the police officer and they didn't find anything, and for the most part, those grievances go, unpunished, even unreported.
Yeah, it can't be a no harm, no foul type thing. Like, oh, sorry, didn't find anything. You can go now. Like, it's not okay.
Right. That's what we're talking about.
Yep.
So the same thing with the strip search. If they didn't find anything, they don't like some lady's attitude, right? Like the lady who was complaining about something that happened to her 20 years ago. I forget her name. If they then said, well, we don't like your attitude, so we're going to strip search you now to humiliate you. Oh, we didn't find anything there? Okay. Now you can put your clothes back on. That's not okay. It should be very clear that we're only doing this if there's, a legal justification for it. And it can't be used just to, exert power over other people who are helpless.
And look, that's another example of where a CCRB might come into play. Because somebody could file a complaint, which would be officially investigated, rather than, if somebody's not arrested and you can't go through the courts for redress, you have to go somewhere.
And I think that's why I'm asking the question if there should be something separate that somewhat outlines that. So I, as a citizen, feel as though there's some policy that covers how I should be treated when I'm stopped by a police officer. Because you're saying to me that the strip search may be used as a way of intimidation. I could say that even if I don't have a strip search, but if I'm being just searched in general, I feel intimidated with that.
100%.
And so that's why I'm asking: is there need for a separate policy behind something like this?
Well,
I could be in the
I think
wrong
the very
place, but help me understand that.
In the beginning, there was something on the policies that the chief sent us that, or their mission statement, everyone has to be treated with dignity and respect. Okay, obviously, everybody agrees with that. It's just how we define that. So, I mean, nobody is ever going to be completely satisfied, or I shouldn't say, what I should say is the police will never be, there are cops who are always going to violate these rules, and you can't prevent every single incident of these things happening. So, that's where an investigating body would come in to investigate these kind of complaints. And also training, hiring officers, better officers, more training on the job, more education. I mean, those are all things that would go toward eliminating this kind of stuff.
I think that's why I'm asking the question if further clarification of policy behind just searches are necessary. I can tell you that I've had I haven't had this happen to me, but I know that it's happened. I've seen it happen to my sons, to my nephews, to others that I've had who are younger people who've just been stopped and their persons either searched or their book bag searched. And it is an intimidating activity, especially in my community where you hear it happen more and more often. I don't know about other communities, but I know in my community it happened more and more often where individuals are stopped and either their persons or something that they have on them are searched, and it is intimidating. So as you're saying that the body uh, cavity search or any body search can be intimidating, then further clarification would also help in this issue. Also, I think not only that it gets weeded out by uh, the review board, but that is there in policy so that the officers know ahead of time that this is through policy something that is or isn't uh, um, allowed. Whereas where it is stated now, it's somewhat hidden in the stop street stop policy. If it was broken out, it may be more clear. And that's the only thing I'm bringing out. Does it bring clarity to having it as a separate procedure or policy?
Well, I think the field stops policy, if you look again at that policy, which I have up on my screen, it seems to me that this policy is providing police officers, and it's a 2006 policy apparently, it's providing police officers with information about how to justify stop and frisks. That's how it appears to me. And they do have a line here about every effort must be to explain the reason for the field stop to the subject in question without compromising an active investigation. But I think that if you read this policy as a whole, it seems to me to be, they're talking about how this is a tool to combat crime, okay? And there's nothing in here about don't use this policy, without careful thought, because we don't want you to be abusive to the populace. In fact, it's suggesting tactics that can be used to, possibly justify further, intrusion, like parking violations, window tint, littering, open container, hooting and hollering. I like that one.
Yeah, it's
Hooting and hollering. Is that race specific? What is that? I mean, some of these. I think that this policy is should be revised, because there should be something in the policy that says, you shouldn't be conducting a a forcible stop of somebody unless there's, reasonable suspicion to believe that this person has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime. Straightforward, not confusing. And, you look at this policy, it says a reasonable suspicion is defined as going to be an officer reasonably suspects criminal behavior exists, which can be based on past articulated experiences. And, to me, that's a WTF minute right there. Okay, what the hell is that? Oh, I've seen this guy before. I remember him in high school. He was a real jerk. What? I mean, I can articulate it, he tried to go out with my girlfriend. Okay, I can articulate it, but that's not, I suspect criminal behavior because I think he cheated at cards one time in 11th grade. What the hell? I mean, this kind of, this policy needs to be changed. And to Bernie's point, we could put something or recommend putting something in here that, would say that that you can't use a stop and frisk as a means of, just randomly stopping people and, using your authority, your gun and a badge to be abusive. Not that this happens all the time, but it should be clearer.
Yes, I agree with it. Thank you, Richard, for recognizing that. There's something I think maybe I would pass along to the committee, the general committee, and that is that I think that it's one thing for us to state in policy, but as you mentioned, Richard, sometimes the policies can be used in order to help the officer justify an action that may, in the eyes of the public, appear to be problematic or is problematic, for i.e. stop and frisk. And if we can identify these actions that can be pointed out and trained into the officer's process in general as to what they should not do or what they will be held accountable for, which is also what I believe that the policy is supposed to highlight or exemplify. These things that you'll be held accountable for if you do not follow them as such. That's why I'm asking, should we have something that actually spells out what uh, frisking or pat down or searching someone, how they differ? Because to my population, it is intimidation. It may be a tactical thing that the officers have to use, but it becomes and has been used as a source of intimidation. And that's where I have concern and thought that clarification or more clarity would help if there were individual policies that specifically spoke to that.
Well, I think it's clear that these things do need to be more particularized. They're very general right now. I don't know how we would go about it other than rewriting the whole thing or maybe coming up with proposed changes.
I think that we could start out by, as we're doing now, making specific note to them that these are things that we see need to be changed, and the comment as to why they should be changed. So my comment as to why is for me as a civilian, as a black male, that this is something that I've seen happen, that I know happens, that this is the cause of this particular policy, as it is stated in a particular way, also leads to the use of this policy as a offense against me as a civilian when I feel that it's being used to intimidate me. So I'll give you an example. If in my community we see that an officer comes in and he's patting somebody down often, and we see it may happen with one individual, two individuals, three, not at the same time, but over a course of time. This then for me becomes a source of intimidation. Anytime I see a police officer, I'm feeling you're going to touch my persons to make a determination about me in some way, and you're justified in doing so. I feel I'm at harm. So how do I ensure in some way for myself and for my community that there is some stipulation that says that, you just can't do that? I don't know, Janice, if you have any thoughts about that, but I could definitely tell you that I do.
Well, I certainly do. And I'm listening to all this and I'm taking it all in. And yeah, I don't know what the answer is, because I hear Richard and I hear his passion, and for what's wrong about these policies, and I agree with him, but I just don't see how we can hold officers, and I'm not talking about the good ones. I'm not talking about the vast majority of them, but I'm talking about one that may decide to do something wrong, how he can be held accountable to us, or the people that he has to answer to, if he's got all these loopholes that he can use. I don't know. I'm just thinking, how do you hold these officers accountable? We can make policies, but it seems to me, from what I hear of other incidences where things have gone wrong, that officers tend to get away with things because they are always able to say, well, they thought, they felt, they had probable cause, and the probable cause was whatever. So, I mean, I don't know how to fix that. So my thinking is, we can put all the policies in place that we want, we can change things around, but with loophole, they always see it. It's not that the policy isn't there, it's that there's always a loophole with holding them accountable. And to me, it's because of the language. And I don't know. Too much the language is, without, with everything with these words, they had, the way they have these things written down is like, well, there's a loophole. If there's always going to be a way for them to come to the union and tell the union guy, well, he reasonably thought. And who can question that? Who can question that? He believed, he felt. I mean, those are the things that get these officers off, and so we can do what we can to change policies and make them clearer, but how do we hold them accountable if there's always a loophole? And that's what upsets the community, is that, it can be wrong as 2 left feet, but they reasonably thought. So they're free to go. They're free to go. And that's what bothers me. These, I don't know how to fix that, because that's, from what I hear, is what's very upsetting to most of us, is that they always seem to get away with it because they reasonably thought.
Right.
And
It's
I don't
a
know.
subjective standard. It's very subjective. And I mean, a lot of it can be reworded to be more objective, without, trying to get rid of some of those words that you're referring to. I mean, I can definitely say that there are, things, a reasonable officer to believe, blah, blah, blah. Well, it should be a different standard, maybe a more objective standard. And, off the top of my head, I don't know what those would be. You'd have to go through each of these policies.
I definitely don't know. But, I know we're trying to do what we can to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And I'm not really that concerned about White Plains, but I just feel like there's just too many loopholes with language that would allow an officer to get away with doing something bad
Right.
And that's the problem that I have, you know,
mean,
because because
yeah.
we don't have any problems with the good cops. We don't have any problem. We don't
Right.
have to worry about rewriting any of this stuff because the good cops are not going to do anything bad. But you know,
Um, uh, we're at 11:47, and I know that we all said we need to get out of here at 12 o'clock. I think this has been a very stirring conversation. We need to continue it. I would ask if we should have our follow-up meeting after we have the meeting with the police department next Wednesday, or if we want to continue. But in addition to that, I don't mean to stop anyone. It's just looking at the time that we have. I did want to ask about uh, what to try to identify some specific questions, and maybe this is the conversation that we want to have with the police department on Wednesday to continue our thoughts behind this. That we specifically look at this policy
Hello?
and come up with some more concrete questions as to how we might be able to address this.
I agree. I think that's a good idea.
I didn't hear it. What was the idea?
That we continue our line of conversation that we're having now on Wednesday with the police department. And prior to getting there, maybe we should come up with some concrete questions as to how to address the issue that we have on the table right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I have one question that I would like to ask them when we go, and that's, I mean, I assume that these policies were modeled after some, you know, some national standard or regional standard, and, you know, I would want to know specifically where they came from.
We should put that down as a follow-up question for
Yeah.
us. Can we could do this via email. Maybe we could put together a series of questions that we'd like to cover on Wednesday, and then have that distributed amongst all of us so that at least we have some baseline to work from in our question and answer session on Wednesday. How does that sound?
Okay.
sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay, then
Yeah.
that'll let us off the phone with everyone. So we'll do this as follow-up. I'll reach out to everyone just to remind them of what we're looking to do. Richard, you're going to be with us on Wednesday. Patrick, are you going to be with us on Wednesday also?
What time?
It's 12 o'clock.
It depends if court's done. Our court usually runs till about 12:30.
Okay, so we're there. I think we were going to try to do a 2-hour session at least this time,
Okay.
which will be from 12 until 2. Am
And
I
I'll
not
join you when
correct,
court ends.
everyone? Is that the case, everybody?
Yes, I think
12
so.
to 2. 12 to 2, yeah.
Yeah, and Merlene, did you have anything that you wanted to add? I know I don't want to seem as though we haven't gotten you into the fray of the conversation. I think this has been a tremendously well-filled conversation that we had today. There's a lot of from what we're talking about that I think is the point of why we came together and is actually the topic that we need to be having conversation about that will affect policy going forward for us, at least in our recommendations. Merlene, anything?
No, I have the same concerns as Janice does, but yeah, I think she pretty much stated how I was feeling, just in regards to how do we know that even though we make these recommendations it'll be actually enforced. So I just have the same concerns as Janice. So if we can get that answered on Wednesday, that'll be helpful.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we'll, as I said, other items that you want to include for the Wednesday conversation, please email them to me. I'll make sure that they'll get to Karen, and we'll at least have those down on paper for our question and answer sessions on Wednesday. Everybody have a great rest of the day. Thank you for being on the line. It's been a tremendous conversation today. I think that very beneficial from my eyes. And unless anyone else has something else to add, have a great day.
You
right.
too. Everybody
Thank
have
you.
a nice,
too.
enjoy
Take
the
care,
rest of your
everyone.
day. See you on Wednesday.
All right.
All right,
Bye.
thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.